SKN. Earlier today, we had a discussion on Women's History Month and its effectiveness, and reached with Patricia Walters and Naima Hazelle. Now we will be speaking with another woman who is a trailblazer in many regards. This woman is Ambassador Rosalyn Hazelle. Pleasant good morning, Ms. Hazelle, and welcome to Good Morning SKN.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Good morning, Ambassador. It's great to have you indeed.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
Very
I'm
well,
not
indeed.
seeing you guys, by the way.
You won't be able to see us until the end of the interview, though.
Oh, okay. All right. You know, I'm learning.
Technology being what it is.
Yes. So you were the first permanent secretary of the Ministry of Community Development, Social Services and Gender Affairs. Tell us about that.
Yeah. I think that in the credit for that, I think would go to our former Prime Minister, Dr. Douglas, where I think he recognized that a number of the departments that dealt with human development were tacked on to various ministries. I would call them various super ministries, health, trade, etc. And he realized that if it was going to be a serious approach for his administration, then he needed to bring all of those various departments together in a ministry. I think he said, what was the term? Be careful what you ask for. Because I had been making so much noise about the fact that these departments were not properly funded, they weren't given credit for the work that they needed to do, etc. And so following the 2000 election, he decided that he will create a super ministry, and I had the honor and the privilege of being its first permanent secretary.
Great. So you are not only the secretary, but you are a superwoman indeed.
Ambassador, if you could walk us through some of your experiences during that time, what were the highlights for you?
I think my highlight was a lot. I would say that the highlight for me started back in 1995, because before I became the permanent secretary for the superhuman ministry, as I called it, I was the first director of women's affairs. And so my excitement and my drive for seeing there to be more programs and more cohesiveness within the country started back from there. So it was under that things like I started to put together the Domestic Violence Act, the Teenage Mothers Policy to Return to School, etc. So it was exciting in a number of ways also to collaborate and reach out to UN agencies who were interested in working with us in these various areas, and also very interested in how we were making our international commitments a reality. For example, our domestic violence legislation, I know that it changed somewhat, I think, in 2014, but when it was first enacted, it was one of two legislation within CARICOM that nationalized our commitment that we made when the country signed the Belém do Pará Convention, which spoke to the elimination, punishment, and prevention of violence against women. So that's where the excitement started. And so I took that into the approach of being the permanent secretary. So I came into that role understanding some of the struggle, having had to work under permanent secretaries and trying to establish the country as a place that was committed to these issues and committed to ensuring that, if not all, because we don't have the capacity to do everything, but if not all, as much as possible of our commitments to become a reality, because then I became the driver, let's put it that way.
Okay. So, Ms. Hazelle, why was it important, or I would say, why was it instrumental for you to ensure that teen mothers return to school? Because when I was in school, I had a few classmates that got pregnant, and they were saying, oh, if they came back to school, they are going to influence the others to get pregnant. So why did you feel the need to be instrumental in these moms returning to school after their pregnancies?
Because Hortensia, when you look at a number of the social issues, you can't look at correcting them without putting in place the mechanisms in which to do so. Mm-hmm. We were also looking at poverty and what was the level of poverty within the society. Mm-hmm. The issue of violence within the society, the whole idea of women and their independence and their ability to be able to take care of themselves. Now, we had a legislation that said that it was statutory rape if you engaged in sexual relations with someone under the age of 16. Mm-hmm. Yet when I started to check the schools, etc., in terms of how many girls had been out of school because of pregnancy, and then I checked that against the police record, there was really no punishment. So in other words, you were re-victimizing the victims. You were setting them up for poverty. You were setting them up for abuse. You were setting them up for dependency and not being able to not only take care of themselves, but take care of their children. And we had, in fact, signed CEDAW, which spoke to the whole issue of ending discrimination against women and girls in a number of areas, and education was one of them. The law was another area as well. So they were being discriminated against in several ways. And in addition to that, we also was signees to the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And our own Education Act said that a child should be in school between the ages of 5 and 16. And so in a number of ways, the practice that we had was infringing on not only our own legislation in terms of the age for sexual activity, the age for being in school, etc., but also those two main commitments that we made. And so I coined it at the time as ability is of little or no use without opportunity. So if you had the ability, but the opportunity wasn't there for you to continue your education, it basically was setting you up for a life possibly of abuse, not being able to come to your own realization in terms of your potential. And at the end of the day, who suffers for that?
The child.
The society. When I look now and I see some of the people who went back into school as soon as that policy was announced by then Minister of Education, Mr. Herbert, I feel very pleased. I feel very, 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 very happy because I see that the idea of what these people would have lost, what the country would have lost if these people didn't have an opportunity to further their education. That's basically the major thrust.
Okay.
The point that you made before the break, I was telling you that I think it was a very important point to make in terms of what informs decisions that have been taken, particularly during your time, but decisions in general that any government official would take. The Teen Mothers Program, I find, was a very good initiative, and I'm glad that you explained it the way that you did, to say that there are many different facets to any decision, and considering that the girls who might eventually grow up to be women who could be victimized by men because of socioeconomic, issues. I think it's really good that that initiative was completed the way that it has been completed. That being said, I now want to shift gears a little bit to speak to you about your role in supporting the advancement of gender equality. And before you answer, since we speak to gender equality, I want to know specifically if by that term your work involves men as well as women.
Yes, I think that the balance of the society. Yesterday I watched your program, and I saw that the logo that I created for gender affairs, women's affairs, gender affairs, because it switched over, was still being used. And if you look at that logo explains exactly what it is that you just asked me. Because what I did was combined the symbol for women, the symbol for men, deliberately colored the symbol for men in pink.
So can you tell us, I see you're involved in many associations, the Aspire Artemis Foundation, you are in the UNESCO Technology Committee, you have a passion for women and girls empowerment. So how do you manage all of these on a day-to-day basis?
Wow, that's part of having when I say I'm retired, my colleagues at Aspire say to me, go sit down. But I think it's a continuation of all of my passions.
Okay.
Aspire is a foundation that is made up of several persons that I have come across throughout the opportunity that I had representing St. Kitts in various forums. And I don't know if you're aware of the SDGs, which came out of the Millennium Goals. One of the things that Aspire is doing is looking at some of those goals and how we can help disadvantaged communities to meet some of those goals. And we are partnering with international organizations, and we're also partnering with governments, and we're looking at training, capacity building. What do I call it? They say I get very excited when it comes to the issue of mentorship, because I believe that there's a lot of things that persons like me and other persons can impart to our younger people. I know that our young people are trying very hard to feel for themselves, make a name for themselves in the society, and that's great. But we also need to be mentoring them, because if we mentor them, and if they allow us to mentor them, we may be able to help them not to fall into certain pit holes. So part of the Aspire mandate is mentorship, and that's my bailiwick. Let me put it that way. So we're doing a lot of educational approach. We're working with young women, young girls. We're working in partnership with different countries. In 2020, we worked with St. Lucia. This year, we are working with the BVI, and we are going to be having what we call a hybrid 3-day session in the BVI, chaired by the premier of the BVI, and that is to bring together, young persons. And when I say hybrid, I'm talking about the fact that we will have people in person and we will have people participating virtually.
In our final moments, and I do wish we had more time to talk to you, but in our final moments, the last question that I have for you concerns any training or support that you give or perhaps have given to professionals in Africa.
Okay. Yeah. One of the other things that I do is I do training throughout various African countries. I deal with executives. I do training in conflict management, emotional intelligence, effective leadership, understanding the sustainable development goals. And so I've worked with a number of companies in various countries. I've also worked with politicians, training on how to be effective leaders, how to understand your mandate. Because one of the things that I've learned, even when I was in St. Kitts, I speak about our commitments. And many times, as leaders, we go out and we commit the country to certain things, but then we don't translate that back down. And the ministries or the departments who should have the mandate to ensure that the country meet those international commitments, many a times they're not aware of them. It's not worked into their work program. It's not worked into their action plans. So some of the things that I've been doing is trying to help agencies to understand that using the SDGs, as well as training politicians in terms of executive principles, etc.
Very engaging and exciting work, and I am so glad that you are keeping active. I can see why your colleagues tell you to sit down when you say that you're retired, because you've got the energy and the drive, and I'm glad that you're keeping very active. Ambassador Hazelle.
They don't just say sit down. They're like, please, Ambassador, go sit down over there somewhere. I'm tired my foot.